Well, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are. I've just been watching the chat. It's unbelievable that so many of you are joining from the UK and Europe when it's either very, very late at night or the wee small hours of the morning. So thanks everybody for joining me today. It's a great privilege for me to be able to impart my experience and insight on how to rapidly improve your promotability prospects. So welcome to Bootcamp. Now, we're going to be together for 3 days. For those of you who don't know me or you're new to our leadership community, I'm Martin G. Moore, but you can call me Marty. I'm the former CEO of a multi-billion-dollar business, and I specialize in turning companies around. So taking businesses from being dysfunctional and stagnant to being best in class. Let's be really clear here, right? I'm no genius. I learned to do this simply by unlocking the capability and performance of the people who worked for me. I used some really simple but important principles, which I executed relentlessly to improve my own leadership skill and the performance of everyone I came into contact with. The power of strong leadership enabled me to lift the performance of my teams to previously unmatched levels. In 2018, I left the corporate world to set up this business, which is called Your CEO Mentor, with my daughter, Emma. We were both really frustrated with the lack of practical, implementable leadership content that we could find out in the market. And although a lot of the content that's out there may be considered inspirational, it's like an air sandwich. So very, very soon after you've consumed it, you're right back where you started. There's no substance, there's no depth, and there's no clear path to improvement. It's absolutely vapid. So we wanted to bring real, practical, implementable tools to market, tools that actually work. We wanted to give leaders all over the world the opportunity to improve their confidence and capability. Now, that was over 5 years ago, and now No Bullshit Leadership is one of the hottest leadership podcasts on the planet. And my book of the same name, which we published in the US in 2021, debuted at number 2 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. Our purpose is to improve the quality of leaders globally. And that's why I'm here today with you. You know, I was incredibly lucky over my 30-plus year career. I had an absolute dream run of opportunities and achievements and promotions. I was a bit of a late bloomer because I didn't really start my corporate career path properly until I was in my late 30s. Up until then, I'd spent the early years of my career as a contract project manager in the software development industry. My first real job was in 2001 as Chief Information Officer for a mining company. But as much as I can say I had a dream run, not everything went my way. I'd enjoyed a pretty steep career trajectory, and I interpreted this succession of internal promotions in the companies I worked for as real-time feedback on my performance. And then I was demoted. Now, let me explain. I had negotiated with the CEO of my company at the time to take a sideways move. I was a senior vice president in a finance role. The CEO wanted to move me into a senior vice president role where I had P&L accountability, either in the commercial and marketing division or in operations. Now, this sideways move was probably one of the best moves I could have made at that time because it would fill a critical gap in my resume. I'd spent most of my career in staff roles as a functional head, CIO, head of strategy, and so forth. I had to prove that I could successfully run a business unit. Now, this was a gap I needed to fill if I was to entertain any hopes of becoming a CEO. For context, this was a company that I had an exceptional track record of performance in. I had already completely reformed the shared services and technology functions, and I'd removed a massive amount of overhead cost from the annual OPEX budgets. I had led the program that stripped over $2 billion of capital investment out of the company's 3-year capital plan, which was an invaluable boost to the balance sheet. I had led the program that transformed the procurement and supply chain functions from the rooms full of bureaucratic paper shuffling administrators to a lean, value-focused commercial unit. But in the post-IPO restructure, as I was positioning for my new role, I got done over by politics. And just remember this, if you do a really great job, your detractors are going to come out in force. So you just got to get used to that. And without wanting to be egotistical or boastful, I had objectively done a great job for the company, no matter how you cared to measure it. The forces of evil that were operating against me in the background had the ear of the CEO. And they made sure that in the shuffle to my new role, I was demoted to the vice president level. Now, this was the level below where I'd been operating for the last 3 years. I guess the rationale was that I was untested in a line leadership role. Now, I was completely devastated by this, not so much because of the ego hit that I had to take, although, of course, that hurt. But the bigger issue for me was that in my head, it pushed me back 2 levels in terms of where my daily focus was going to be. I felt as though, as a senior vice president in finance, I had mostly operated at the level above my title. I was part of the executive team, and I was the most trusted advisor to the CFO. So pushing me back down the line to what would effectively feel like 2 levels below was a really bitter blow. I'd worked too hard and too smart to get to where I was. And I was super pissed that this was the reward for what I considered to be some of the most impactful and value-creating work that I'd ever done in my career. So, of course, I thought about moving on, which is a polite way of saying that. But I guess after much soul searching, I decided to put my ego aside, take my medicine, and get on with it. Even with the demotion, it was still the best path for my long-term career future. Now, to cut a long story short, within 6 months, I was promoted back up to the senior vice president level in the commercial and marketing division. And this division had P&L accountability for the company. From there, I led some of the largest customer contract negotiations that the business had ever had. These were long-tail, multi-year commitments worth billions of dollars in revenue with a B. And my team won every single contract. At the end of that, even one of my biggest detractors, one of those guys who had originally engineered my temporary demise, said to me, "There's no doubt about it, Marty. Your performance in the new role has been extraordinary." Happy days, right? So look, I bounced back from that disappointment and the rest is history. Now, I know that without my success in that role, there is no way I would have been tapped on the shoulder to take on the CEO role at CS Energy. I learned a huge amount from that experience. And this is just one story of navigating my way from undergraduate law school dropout to CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Over my time, I learned as much from the losses as I did from the wins. And as much as I figured out how to lead for performance, I also learned how to navigate the promotion maze. And that's why this week I'm giving you my 3 proven strategies for rapid career advancement, the lessons that I learned the hard way. When it comes to promotions, a recent Bloomberg report tells us that out of 68 million white-collar workers, just 1.3% of those were promoted in the first quarter of this year. And this is the lowest rate in 5 years. Employers hold a lot more leverage than they did just a couple of years ago. And as the COVID dust settles and companies reorganize around new working arrangements, moving employees up the ladder in order to retain them just simply isn't a priority. People are also locking into jobs for longer, given the global uncertainty with the economic conditions. So with all that economic mass layoffs spanning multiple industries, you need to be more focused than ever before on your personal development. So what do you need to do to 10x your promotability in such a tight labour market? Over the next 3 days, or 4 days if you're joining our VIP session, I'm going to clearly lay out a path for you. Now remember, I'm not the silver bullet guy. There are no quick fixes, there are no magic potions, there are no shallow, just do this remedies. I'm the guy who gives you practical tools, proven strategies, and I'm going to bring you every ounce of wisdom and insight that I can muster from my 62 years on this planet. I know you're all thinking I look younger, but no, I've actually turned 62. I'm going to lay out the path and give you the tools that you need to be successful, but ultimately, it's up to you. You have to choose whether you're prepared to do what it takes to implement them or not. So, what have we got coming up? 3 days of free training, 30 to 45 minutes live with me each day. You'll have access to the replays for a limited time, unless, of course, you have a VIP pass, in which case you'll have lifetime access to all of the content from this bootcamp. As I said, we'll be running a 4th day for VIPs only, and you can register for this one separately. It's only 57 Australian dollars, and we will send you a personalised promotion plan before the session, which you can go through and then ask me any questions you've got about it in live mode. That's a 90-minute session for VIPs on day 4. Tash, I'm sure she's going to put a link in the notes now in the chat so that you can register if you're interested in it. Now, the agenda for today is my first strategy: elevate your leadership presence. Tomorrow, at the same time, all of these sessions are going to be at the same time, day after day, master the art of influence and politics. On Wednesday evening for the US, Thursday morning for Australia, we'll have a 3rd strategy, which is unleash your team's potential. And then finally, Thursday evening US, Friday morning Australia, our VIP only session, which is strategy 4, your personalized promotion plan with a long Q&A with me and Em. Now, before we get into the first lesson, I just want to talk to you about the problem that most of you are facing at the moment. You know what it is. Getting a promotion is challenging. When you're in the middle layers, especially, it's hard to know what you can do to make a difference. Just staying on top of your current role can be challenging enough without thinking about doing something different in order to get to the next level. So you're facing pressure from above and below. You're under constant pressure from your boss to deliver more with less. And at the same time, your team's pushing back, claiming to be under-resourced. This constant pressure can make you feel like you're the meat in the sandwich, as though you lack the autonomy to make impactful decisions. Then there's the ever-present spectre of the lack of resources. You typically struggle with not having enough people, money, assets, and time to meet the objectives you've been set. And this scarcity forces you to make compromises, which can lead to half-baked efforts, a culture of cynicism, and ultimately mediocre results. And this impacts both your credibility and stunts your career growth. You're probably also dealing with lack of access to information, which isn't a problem we talk about that often. But as a mid-level leader, you often operate without the full context of the executive level discussions. And they just tell you to do what you're told. And this can lead to poor decisions and a difficulty in explaining those decisions to your team. Then there's a lack of information undermining both your confidence and the quality of your decisions. It really hurts you a lot of different ways, that one. You're probably struggling with insufficient strength to hold people accountable. You may not have mastered conflict situations, making it challenging just to hold your team members accountable. And this can result in underperformance and a lack of respect from your team, which further hinders your promotion prospects. You're probably finding it hard to influence across boundaries. Successfully influencing your peers and external stakeholders is a critical skill for senior leadership roles. And you might find this particularly challenging, especially if you lack decent role modeling or support from your own boss. And of course, all of this adds up to hit your confidence, feeling like you've hit a promotion ceiling. So despite being motivated and ambitious, you may just feel stuck, right, due to the competitive environment and the pressures of your life stage even, having young kids or a big mortgage with interest rates rising. Each missed promotion can sow seeds of doubt and discontent, further complicating your career progression. So I still remember what it was like to be at that phase. I lived that struggle firsthand. If any of this resonates with you, you know you're in the right place by being here today. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. Strategy 1 is elevate your leadership presence. What do you want people to say about you behind your back? When your name's brought up in a room that has your boss and your peers in it, what do they say about you? Now, I want to take a minute for you to write this down. And this is a really good test to find out whether you've managed to get the workbook yet. So on page 4 of the workbook, you'll find a sheet where you can write down what your peers and boss say about you when you're not there. Just take a minute to do that. I'll give you some thinking music, and my throat's getting super dry, so I'll have a drink as well. By the way, if you don't know what's being said about you in those rooms, you need to know. So you've got to find a way of working that out. It's quite important. All right. You can take these exercises offline, of course. You've got access to those workbooks. And there's a few really, really important exercises. One we're going to go through in quite a bit of detail in just a little while. All right. We've got quite a few podcast resources to help you with your leadership presence as well. Two of my favorites are episode 182, What is Strong Leadership? And episode 134, Being More Strategic, whatever that means. So this is the first step, and that's a level of awareness about how you might be perceived by the people who have decision-making power over your career success. What do you want them to believe and say about you? Is there a gap between that and what you wish they were saying? And is there a gap between this and how you're actually performing as a leader? These are pretty worthwhile questions. And if you don't know the answer right now, that's okay. But it might prompt you to schedule a conversation with your direct boss to ask a few of those questions. And you can ask them questions like, how do you see my career potential in this company? Is that a consistent view with your peers and above? What perception do you think the senior leadership has of me right now? Are there any detractors that you know of at more senior levels who might adversely impact my promotion prospects? And what would I have to do to improve that perception? Is anyone brave enough to share their experiences here? Some of you may have had these conversations already, or you may be contemplating these conversations in a roundabout way with your boss. So come on, this isn't just a spectator sport. Let's get the chat going properly. Anyone who wants to put their experiences in the chat, please do so now. See what we got. I was sidelined after asking questions. Yes, this happens all the time, right? Sometimes your boss is just going to want you to stay in your place, but that's no reason not to ask them. Now, one of the important things here is you've got to have a relationship with your boss so that you can have a free-flowing conversation. If that's not there, I don't know how you get through the day, honestly, because there are so many things that you need to have that communication flow with your boss about. Really, really important. What else we got? Well, hang on. Oh, these are all moving so fast. I can see you all getting involved in this. I'm not going to be able to participate because, number one, the window's too far away and my eyesight isn't good enough to see it as it rolls past. Number two, it's going quickly, right? There's a lot of you commenting. So please engage in the chat with each other while we're going through this process. And, you're going to find some good contacts here, which you can take over to the Facebook group later on after this session. So that's awesome. All right, let's get back to it. Having a reputation as a strong leader isn't just important for your current company, but for your future opportunities as well. Now, I was tapped on the shoulder for multiple roles because of my leadership brand. My unique leadership fingerprint was built around delivering high performance in some of the most culturally challenging circumstances, shall we say. I just want to give you a mild caution about the word brand. It has some interesting connotations. Did anyone see the recent South Park episode on personal branding? It was absolutely hilarious. But when we say the word brand, it can feel as though it isn't founded in substance, but it's more a case of how would you like the world to see you? So let me be really clear on this. The only way to build your brand is to build yourself. Your brand is the articulation of who you really are. It's not a facade for how you'd like the world to see you when that may not be genuine. Here's the thing. If you try to portray a personal leadership brand that is not consistent with who you are and how you behave, you will be found out. Now, maybe not by your boss, you might be able to cover that up well enough, but at least by your team. They'll spot it. And that will breed a lack of trust and a lack of loyalty. And then you will have zero chance of tapping into the discretionary effort that produces superior results. Now, of course, this is where promotability starts, with results. Consistency and congruence build trust and loyalty. This is what drives superior performance, and it's the foundation of your promotability. The other critical components in your leadership presence are your communication skills, right? And your ability to build productive working relationships, which we're going to talk more about in tomorrow's session. When it comes to your leadership brand, we have a free resource for you that I believe is absolutely invaluable. It shows you how to construct your own leadership user manual. This is going to help you to think deeply about what type of leader you really are, and then to articulate that clearly to the people around you so that everyone can see what you're trying to achieve, what your approach is to the complex and often confounding discipline of leadership, what's important to you, and how can other people get the most out of you. If you do this exercise diligently with as much introspection and self-awareness as you can muster, it's going to deliver some invaluable insights into the gaps between where you are now as a leader and where you would prefer to be. When it comes to your leadership user manual, you've got to get beyond the LinkedIn platitudes. Now, look, I know that you are all values-driven, collaborative leaders who build high-performing teams, right? I log onto LinkedIn every day. I know what's out there. But this is actually the problem. Anyone can make the claim, but not everyone can make good on the claim. Now, this exercise is purely for your own benefit. You don't need to broadcast it to the world, but it's going to give you a really useful foundation for thinking about your promotability. So let me walk you through my leadership user manual so you get an idea of how to construct your own. And you can follow this through on page 6 of your day 1 workbook. Tash, hey, just drop that link in the notes again now in the chat so that people can get it if they haven't already. Now, you got to remember, before we go into this exercise, I've worked on this for decades. So don't feel as though you have to replicate mine or come up with something equally precise. It doesn't have to be comprehensive. You've just got to get started thinking about who you are and how you lead. The most important thing is to make sure that it is genuinely representative of who you are. When I read my leadership user manual, it is so me. Now, anyone who's worked for me or next to me, anyone who I've reported to directly will read this and go, yep, that's Marty, for better or for worse. I am the no bullshit leader. That's it. I have the luxury of knowing exactly who I am. Now, as an aside, I had a very interesting discussion with one of the speaker bureaus that represents me over here in the US. The owner of this agency suggested that I change my branding slightly. Some of his bigger corporate customers were turned off by the word bullshit. Go figure, right? Anyhow, he was having trouble selling me into some of his clients in the Midwest. My answer to him was swift and it was unequivocal. Mate, I'm not changing my brand. It's who I am. If your clients are put off by that, then I'm clearly not the right person to be speaking at their conference. I'd rather lose the business than pretend that I'm someone I'm not. Authenticity drives success. So let's have a look at my leadership user manual. Now remember to download the workbook so you can start building your own. Let's start with my personal style. I'm direct. You'll never be in any doubt as to what I'm thinking. I'm very open. I'm prepared to question everything. I love to cut to the chase. I don't dance around issues. I don't want to spend time wasted talking about things that don't matter. I want to get to the crux of it. I'm inquisitive. I want to know how things work. I want to know why you hold a particular viewpoint. I'm courageous, sometimes to my own detriment, because I'm not hamstrung by the fear of not being liked. And I'm not afraid to disagree with the most powerful person in the room. Now, I've got to tell you, this has gone against me as many times as it's gone for me. I constantly challenge. I'll always push the boundaries to try to find higher performance or greater efficiency or better results. I have a sense of humor. I crack jokes frequently. Some of them are even funny. What else? I'm awesome at the detail when I need to be. Like I do detail really well. but I much prefer to stay at the high level. My default is 10,000 feet. All right, so that describes my personal style in as much detail and complexity as I think is useful. Now, can you imagine working for a leader who gave you that clarity around their individual style? That would tell you so much about what the best way was to interact with them. And imagine if you could portray this as your brand, if whatever your brand is, so it'll be different to mine, but if you could portray and project that and then communicate it, how valuable do you think that would be? Let's move on to my philosophy. Respect before popularity every time. Do the right thing when it needs to be done just because it's right. My philosophy is that a leader has to set and maintain really high standards for performance and behavior. That's basically all you've got. I also believe that people have to be held accountable individually for their choices. And if there are no consequences, there's just no incentive to perform. Now, as sad as that is, it's absolutely true of human nature. I've learned that over the years. Optimal performance only comes when people are stretched beyond their comfort zones. I absolutely believe that. And I also firmly believe that there's a place for people where they're happiest, where they're pushed just beyond what their current limitations are, where they feel uncomfortable. That's where they're going to be the happiest. That's where they sense achievement and satisfaction and impact. That's where you build their self-esteem. I also have a philosophy that leaders have to differentiate between individuals based on merit. I believe that if you choose to take on a leadership role, then doing the hard work of leadership is not negotiable. It comes with the territory. I really believe you've got to put your people's best interests ahead of your own fear and discomfort. I believe you need to create a culture that focuses on value delivery. No blame, no excuses. And you know what I really believe in? Competition. Geez, that's unfashionable, isn't it? Competitive markets are the path to prosperity. Competition makes us all better. Without it, we just become fat, dumb, and happy. All right, so that's a really, really comprehensive look at my philosophy. I'll move through a little bit faster now. How do you get the best out of me? Well, engage me. Share your challenges and problems. I actually see it as a privilege, not a burden, to have the opportunity to help you to perform better. Use me for my strategic thinking ability. I know that this is one of my superpowers, my capacity for recognizing patterns and applying them to new problems and scenarios. If you bring the detail, we'll be able to get the benefit of my high order sense-making skills and judgment. How about the things that I won't tolerate? This will be good. I don't tolerate dishonesty of any kind. I don't tolerate entitlement mentality or laziness or avoidance. I don't tolerate excuses. I mean, like, yeah, maybe I'm just getting old and grumpy, but every time someone gives me an excuse, it doesn't matter what's coming out of their mouth. The only thing that goes through my head is the dog ate my homework. That's all I can hear. I don't tolerate hiding bad news and covering up problems. Don't sugarcoat a situation to play down its true level of criticality. That's just taking away my ability to manage. How do you communicate with me? What's the best way to do it? Well, look, I'm pretty direct and open. I'm pretty transparent, and I value that in others as well. The more straightforward you are, the easier our flow of communication is going to be. In terms of written communication, don't write lengthy documents. Your written comms should be clear, simple, and direct. Like, I won't even read your email if it's like War and Peace. So don't be surprised if you don't get an answer. Talk to me at the high level in terms of outcomes, and we'll fill in the details as our discussion moves forward. Just don't try to beat me into submission by bombarding me with details in the hope of convincing me. It just won't work. What's the next piece of my leadership user manual? My brand. How to be wildly successful. What can you do working for me to be wildly successful? Well, focus on value, right? Understand what the biggest value levers are and focus solely on those. Fight with every fiber of your being to eliminate non-valuating work. Always think and talk about results, not activity and processes. Do the hard work of leadership. Get super comfortable with difficult conversations. Challenge others and allow yourself to be challenged. Do the basics well. Performance management, capability building, accelerating talent development. And most of all, I know the slide says stay humble, but I say just don't believe your own bullshit, right? Don't let yourself get all pumped up because you've had a little bit of success, because today's rooster is tomorrow's feather duster. All right, what do people misunderstand about me? People sometimes think I don't care about a crisis situation because I'm pretty relaxed under extreme pressure. I use humor as a stress management tool. Ironically, people sometimes think I only care about the results and not the people, but nothing could be further from the truth. But I know that there are a vast number of stakeholders who are invested in the business, not just your employees. So we also have to consider customers and shareholders and suppliers. And I genuinely believe that superior performance is the only way to truly satisfy all of your stakeholders, including your employees. And finally, my favorite, you won't enjoy working for me if you aren't prepared to give your best, I'm not going to let you be mediocre. You won't enjoy working for me if you just want to cruise along and count the hours of the day. You absolutely won't enjoy working for me if you don't believe in the principle of meritocracy. You won't enjoy working for me if you aren't comfortable with constructive tension. You won't enjoy it if you aren't prepared to take accountability for your own performance and behavior. Now, with all of these things that I've gone through, you're going to get a pretty good idea of who I am, how I operate, what I find important, and what you would need to do to prosper under my leadership. And for a lot of people, they will say, I don't want to work for that guy. That would be my biggest nightmare. And if that's the case, that's what you need to know. You've got to find that out. And so your leadership brand, if you set it up that's very, very consistent and congruent with who you are, that is super, super important. And people then will know exactly what to expect. And that's what you want. And if you're performance focused, and if you can build teams and build people up and grow your business profitably, then guess what? You're going to be in high demand. And the people above you are going to work out how they can promote you faster before another company comes in and takes you away. They will lie awake at night worrying about it. And that's exactly where you want them. So remember, you've got your own leadership user manual. That template's in today's workbook. Make sure you download it if you haven't done already. Tash, once more with feeling, drop the link into chat and take some time to develop your own leadership user manual. It's going to give you real clarity around who you are so that you can strengthen your leadership presence accordingly. All right. I'm going to go on and do some questions, I think. So let me just jump off here for a minute and get over to our questions page and see what we've got. Okay, Sonia. Hey, Sonia. At what point in time should you ask these questions? I've only been in the organization 3 months. Okay. This is a fantastic question because it is time dependent. The questions that I went through earlier on about the things you should talk to your boss about, this relies on a couple of things, right? The first thing is that the organization already has had a chance to establish that you are the right person for them. If you've only been there for a few months, they might still have question marks over certain things, not because you're doing anything wrong, just because you're getting your feet under the desk. What I would say is that, Sonia, work on the relationship you have between you and your boss. Work on that relationship so that you feel as though those questions would be appropriate and would flow. So if you've got a really steady flow of communication between the two of you and you start asking those types of questions about, okay, so I've been here for a little while now, I'm ambitious, hardworking. I want to cast a path for myself in the organization, but I want to know how the organization sees me. Like, I love where I am and I want to move up, but how can I do that? And that will lead to a number of different questions that your boss should be happy to answer. And if not, that's not a good sign. That's a red flag. Not necessarily for you or for what you're doing, but a red flag for the person you're working for who may not necessarily support your career path as actively as you might like. So, Sonia, I hope that helps. Michelle, Marty, what would you recommend sharing with, when would you recommend sharing this with a team? When you onboard a new team? Well, look, I think you can do this anytime. So we're talking about, I assume, the leadership user manual. what I would say is whenever you can articulate that, it's really useful. Now, if you've got people who've been working for you for a while, then you can use them to help you test it out. There's always going to be a little bit of a gap between the way you see yourself and the way the people around you see you. So if you've got a trusted advisor in there, Michelle, wouldn't it be cool if you could just say to the trusted advisor, hey, look, I'm developing my leadership user manual. I'm trying to articulate as clearly as possible how I operate so that the people around me can get a better idea of how to be successful. Can you just run through this and tell me if you see it the same way as I do? Tell me if you think that's entirely accurate and it's comprehensive enough and it describes who I am and what I'm doing. So I think that would be a useful thing to do. So you can use it at people at any time in their tenure or yours. But of course, depending on the relationship, whether you do it one-on-one, which I would suggest is probably the best way to do it. You don't want to just drop it on the team and say, right, team, here's how we're all going to operate from now. That could freak them out a little bit. So yeah, I think that's probably the best way to go. Relationship by relationship, one-on-one, eyeball to eyeball. Vicky, Marty, I'm curious as to the process you followed to get such a clear idea of who you are as a leader. How are you able to articulate so clearly? Okay, good question, Vicky. I wasn't able to sit down. If I'd sat down 10 years ago and done that, I would have done it completely differently. When I say 10 years ago, sorry, let's say I had a corporate executive career of about 20 years. Halfway through that, it would have been completely different to what it was on my final iteration of it. Like anything else, it's a work in progress. You've got to be really confident about who you are. You've got to know what drives you. And you've got to be the sort of person who is strong in their convictions about what they will take, what they won't take, what they will allow, what they won't allow, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. I know exactly what my weaknesses are, and that's so awesome, right? I can't tell you how valuable that is. So I know that I stay away from detail. Like if I get forced into it, I'm so good at it, but I just don't enjoy it. So when someone says to me, oh, I'm going to send you a 50-page document to read about this particular issue we're having, I'll go, Cliff Notes. Give me the Cliff Notes, right? I just want to find out what the overall points are, and I'll ask questions that allow me to drill down where I need to. To do that, of course, you need a really good bullshit detector. So I know I've got a great bullshit detector, and I can smell where the different points don't add up or they don't align, and I can calibrate those and ask the right question that gets me to the right piece of detail. But I hate getting lost in mountains of stuff. I don't have time for it, and it's not my job, right, at that level. So I guess it evolves over time. It becomes more certain in your own head as you not only articulate the principles, but you find yourself living them in practice. So I think the real confidence comes, Vicky, when there's no gap between who you say you are, who you think you are, and the way you present yourself to the world. That's really the hardest part. Once you get there, which, takes a lot of years, you'll be good with it. Hope that helps. Suda, how do you rebrand yourself after being affected by office politics that have negatively impacted your perception and professional brand? Okay, fantastic question. If you've already been victim of politics, and this is absolutely where I was in the story I started off with, when I got demoted, I had to rebuild the brand. I don't know why. I don't know what people said about me, but we're going to talk about this tomorrow when we talk about influence and politics in a lot more detail. One thing I will say, though, is that after you've been affected by politics, you need to keep doing what you're doing. You need to work out where the source of the political strife has come from and make sure that you've got that neutralized, if that's the right expression. Tomorrow's session is going to go into a lot more detail about how to manage those stakeholders in your field of vision. But I think it's really about saying, okay, the only thing I can do is be myself and double down. I would always use what I would call some neutralizing tactics. So if my boss had heard something and got a bad impression of something I'd done or said, then I would say something like, okay, I don't know where you've heard this from. What I do know is that we're pissing a few people off as we do this. And I suspect there are going to be people who are saying A, B, C, or D because it's shaking their foundations a little bit, the foundations of their power base and position. So I'm expecting a bit of noise out of this, but you need to hold firm with me because I'm going to get the result going forward and I'm going to do it in the right way. I don't play politics. I'm not going to play politics, but you just need to know that I'm going to put my head down and double down on getting this result. So I think taking it head on with the boss in terms of making sure that they know that you're aware of it, that you are still working with the right intent. I've got to tell you, Suda, the view is so much better from the moral high ground. If you can remain on the moral high ground and not get dragged down into the politics, you'll be in a really good place. I could do a full boot camp on that question alone. Thank you for the question. I hope it helped you. Just my short answer. We got Jay. Has the leadership style changed over time as your self and business landscape changes over time? Yes and no. I think there is an optimal way to lead. I call it strong leadership. There's a podcast episode I did a little while back called What is Strong Leadership? And I think Tash or one of the team will put that link in the notes. I'm sure they'll have it at hand. But What is Strong Leadership talks about the optimal style of leading for results. So you've got to be results focused, value focused. You've got to have strong accountability for your people, but you've also got to be balancing that with supportiveness and empowerment and autonomy and resourcing and all the things that they need to do to feel safe and to be successful. I don't think that's changed. And I think one of the most interesting things about people, humans, is we don't always know what's good for us in the long term. We might know short term what we think is good for us, but in the long term, it's sometimes really, really hard to tell because we will go for immediate satisfaction of our short-term needs, or we'll avoid fear and discomfort, which could actually be quite good for us in the long term. So I think it's quite important that we have that sense of strong leadership. It's something that makes a massive, massive difference as to how your team views you. I think that if you're a laissez-faire leader and you want to just, let's say nurture your team, in other words, mollycoddle your team, it doesn't work. They won't respect you. They'll take advantage of you. Performance will be low. Anyone who's decent and wants to perform at a high level will leave. You'll end up with a really, really mediocre team. So has my leadership style changed over time? I've probably softened a little bit, I think, from where I was, 20 years ago. I understand more about the people side of connection and communication and motivation. So I understand that a lot more. I still have the hard edge of performance that is an impenetrable buffer there, but I have it in a way now where I'm more concerned about seeing the people thrive and prosper through the process, because I know that at the other end of it, that achievement and self-satisfaction and self-esteem they get is going to be absolutely worth it in the long run. Hope that helps, Jay. All right. I better keep moving on. We're almost at time. I just want to wrap up very briefly with a couple of things. If I can get my frame back. There we go. So what's coming up in Bootcamp? That's pretty good for today. There are resources from this session, of course. Have you got them yet? Tash, are we going to put a link in the chat again so that people can download the workbook? You can also find them in the Facebook group. Now, Em and Tash are going to be over in the Facebook group now if you want to do the activities and share with the group how you went. Tomorrow, obviously, same time as today, Master the Art of Influence and Politics. On day 3, Unleash Your Team's Potential. And then, of course, day 4, our VIP bonus, which you still have time to purchase, 57 Australian dollars. And you'll need to fill out a survey so that we can help to work out your promotion strengths and weaknesses. And once you've done that, me and the team are going to give you 3 recommendations for how to improve your personal promotability. So this is an individual tool we're going to do for you. The session is going to be 90 minutes on day 4, and I'll answer all the questions you have about your personalized plan and anything else you have around 10xing your promotability. In your workbook, there are several exercises, your leadership presence, the key questions to ask your boss, your leadership user manual template, which you should have already found, identifying your promotion challenges, and finally, setting high standards. So head over to the Facebook group if you want to discuss anything from today's session with the other leaders who are in this session, or with Em and Tash from our team. They're going to be live in there now. As an incentive to actually implement this, we're going to give you one $200 Amazon gift card today to the leader who completes their leadership user manual and posts about what they learned in the Facebook group. Now, there's one only. We're not giving you all $200. Don't get too carried away. we're going to choose a winner at random, and Tash will reach out to you with your gift card. So just a little bit of extra incentive to get involved, right? It's easy to sit back there and listen. It's much, much harder to take action. So for more info, just head to the Facebook group. The link is in the chat. All right, that's everything from me. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, where we're going to talk about mastering the art of influence and politics. This is where the rubber meets the road. Thanks very much, guys. Have a fantastic rest of your day or night.